From collapsing infrastructure to questionable safety measures, this underwater city is more Final Destination than Finding Nemo. Let's dive into the unsafe madness of the Bikini Bottom. Let's start with SpongeBob, who somehow manages to take danger to a whole new level and drags us along for the ride in Welcome to the Bikini Bottom Triangle. We kick things off on a foggy night when a chorus of seductive mermaid voices croons into the abyss, luring objects and eventually characters into the Bikini Bottom Triangle. By morning, SpongeBob wakes up to find his alarm clock, Gary's shell, Squidward's clarinet, and Patrick's cufflinks have vanished. Oh, and Mr. Krabs is MIA too, but hey, at least the Krusty Krab is still intact, right? Priorities. One thing leads to another, and SpongeBob and Squidward find themselves sucked into the foggy void, which looks like a hoarder's paradise with a mermaid quintet thrown in for good measure. Our Spongy Boy is freaking out, imagining the worst.
Oh, Squidward, Mr. Krabs is gone. Oh, it hurts so bad! I can't take it much longer!
Krabs, of course, is living his best life here, surrounded by piles of resellable stuff, while getting a dang massage and blissfully forgetting about the daughter he left behind. Pearl and Patrick eventually get dragged into this mess too. Pearl just wants to get her dad back so she can hit them all, while Patrick gets love-struck by the mermaids and decides to stick around. Typical Patrick, falling for the singing ladies who literally admit they have no interest in helping anyone because SpongeBob's dilemma is, and I quote,
anything beyond that is TNOP.
Team up?
Yeah. You know, totally not our problem.
Oh, TNOP!
Honestly, the audacity is bloody impressive. Things take a turn for the worse when SpongeBob collapses and is declared dead from Bikini Bottom Triangle disease. Yeah, that's a thing now. Cue Mr. Krabs saving the day with the ultimate plot twist: the cure is a Krabby Patty. Convenient? Yes. Ridiculous? Also yes. SpongeBob is revived and the gang makes a mad dash to get out of the triangle before the disease claims them all. But the mermaids are still being bloody difficult. Pearl saves the day by introducing them to the concept of a mall, which completely blows their dang minds. Now obsessed with this magical land of overpriced coffee and pretzel stands, the mermaids agree to sing their hypnotic song in reverse, which somehow reverses the triangle's vacuum effect and spits everyone and their missing belongings back into Bikini Bottom. Sure, why not? Back home, chaos gives way to mild resolution. Charles, the random customer from earlier, has been holding down the fort at the Krusty Krab, casually cooking Krabby Patties and trapping plankton in a bloody jar. Patrick finds his cufflinks, hops into a limo like he's James Bond, and leaves SpongeBob shouting about a misplaced cummerbund as the episode ends. So yeah, if you're ever in Bikini Bottom, avoid mysterious fog and singing mermaids, but don't relax just yet. Things are about to go from bizarre to bananas, courtesy of your favorite underwater diner in Shark vs. Pod. It all starts like any normal day at the Krusty Krab, which is to say it's not normal at all. SpongeBob is grooving while cleaning up, living his best life, when a gang of actual sharks roll up, because that's just something that happens in Bikini Bottom apparently. These guys, calling themselves Ronnie, Donnie, Lonnie, and Sharkface, waste no time recruiting SpongeBob into their crew. How? By hyping him up with vague promises of coolness and chaos. SpongeBob, of course, dives in head first without asking questions. This isn't gonna end well. The sharks whisk him away in their lightning-emblazoned car, wreaking a trail of mild confusion? Girls scream and faint when they see the sharks, not because they're scary, but because they're fans. Meanwhile, a fruit vendor randomly pelts them with his entire inventory, presumably trying to improve their dietary habits. It's like an unintentional PSA wrapped in a comedy sketch. Then comes the face-off setup. The sharks pull up to the Howlin' Marlin Club, only to be stopped by a bouncer who flat-out bans them because of an incident involving their ex-member, Johnny. Apparently, Johnny's signature dance move obliterated the club's floor. Note to self, never hire sharks to dance on hardwood. But wait, this isn't just about the sharks, it's sharks versus pods, and the rival gang makes their dramatic entrance.
Huh? The pods.
What?
Cue snarling, posturing, and everyone's favorite buzzkill, the cops. The standoff ends anticlimactically when the cops step in, leaving SpongeBob wondering if his gang life was over before it began. SpongeBob's had enough by this point. He heads home only to find a note saying Gary's been abducted by the sharks, and the drama intensifies. SpongeBob trains like a Rocky montage and shows up at the big face-off prepared to fight. But hold up, this isn't a fist fight, it's a dance-off. Yes, folks, all that build-up leads to a bloody Bikini Bottom boogie. SpongeBob is bewildered, but everyone's like, duh, this is how we settle things here. What follows is a gloriously absurd sequence of synchronized dance moves that would make Broadway jealous. Squidward is revealed as a pod member, no one's shocked, he loves a bit of drama, and even the cops join in the dance-off instead of, keeping the peace. By the time Internal Affairs arrives, it's less justice is served and more pass me the boombox. SpongeBob learns that Gary wasn't kidnapped, he's the DJ for this aquatic step-up sequel. With the sharks declared winners, thanks, Krabs, everyone jumps around in celebration. Patrick randomly announces they've saved the rec center, a plot point no one knew existed, while Squidward sulks over not winning anything. In Bikini Bottom, even a dance battle can escalate into complete lunacy, and somehow sharks and squid can form rival street gangs over dance moves. Safe? Not even close, but entertaining? Always. And you thought Sharks vs. Squid was the peak of Bikini Bottom chaos? Hold on to your goggles because things are about to get bottled in rodeo days. SpongeBob and Patrick are mid-staring contest, what else would they be doing, when a literal message in a bottle interrupts their shenanigans. The bottle smacks SpongeBob square in the forehead because that's just how the darn mail works in Bikini Bottom. Talk about shitty service. The note's for Sandy, and off they go to her tree dome. After an unnecessary amount of struggle figuring out how to open her door, thanks How to Open Things book, Sandy karate chops her way out like the Squirrel Terminator and beats the letter straight out of the bottle. Turns out it's rodeo time in Texas, and Sandy's twin brother Randy is calling her back to defend her rodeo title. So of course, Sandy's hyped. SpongeBob and Patrick, not so much. They think this whole rodeo business sounds like a death trap, which it probably is. Instead of explaining it, Sandy does what anyone in Bikini Bottom would do, breaks into an unsolicited musical number about the thrill of the rodeo. Picture a high-energy hoedown complete with Sandy spinning a lasso, SpongeBob sweating bullets, and Patrick obliviously vibing. By the end of the song, SpongeBob's fully convinced that rodeos are squirrely versions of gladiator battles with rodeo clowns thrown in to traumatize people for laughs. He begs Sandy to reconsider, but she's already blasting off to Texas. Literally, her suit turns into a rocket. Now SpongeBob's panicking because Sandy's about to meet her doom in the Lone Star State. He rallies Patrick for help, but Patrick's about as useful as a chocolate teapot. So SpongeBob does the bloody logical thing, kidnaps the entire town while they're asleep. That's right, he bubbles up everyone, Super Smash Bros. Style, and carts them off to Texas. Squidward wakes up mid-flight, steps outside SpongeBob's pineapple, and immediately plummets to the ground because, surprise, the pineapple's still floating in a bubble. Chaos reigns. When they finally land in Texas, the crew discovers Sandy is already deep in the rodeo, riding a live-action bullfrog. Yes, you heard that right. As Bikini Bottom residents gawk at this bizarre scene, SpongeBob yells out to Sandy mid-bullfrog bucking. Distracted, Sandy loses her grip and her title, crashing to the ground while the bullfrog goes on a rampage. The bullfrog targets SpongeBob and pops the bubble, keeping the gang safe. Thanks for that, SpongeBob. Sandy saves our spongy boy from becoming bullfrog bait, but she's not happy about it. She snaps at him for ruining her winning streak and declares that next time, he should leave the rodeo business to her.
Next time, leave the rodeos to me.
Aw, nuts.
Bikini Bottom citizens can't even avoid danger while asleep. Rodeos may be high stakes, but add SpongeBob's help and they become outright disasters. Moral of the story? Maybe stay in your bubble. Metaphorically and literally. Just when you thought things couldn't get more hazardous, the underwater DMV says, "Hold my kelp smoothie." Let's see how SpongeBob handles life in the fast lane in No Free Rides. The chaos kicks off in No Free Rides at Mrs. Puff's boating school, where SpongeBob is failing his latest boating test in spectacular fashion. How bad? He literally runs over the French narrator. I mean, he's a disembodied voice, SpongeBob. How do you even hit that? SpongeBob shrugs it off with his eternal optimism, looking forward to yet another year of bloody tormenting Mrs. Puff with his unique approach to driving. Puff, however, is at her breaking point. Desperate to rid herself of this nautical nightmare, she hatches a brilliant, yet catastrophically terrible plan. Give SpongeBob an extra credit assignment so ridiculously easy he can't possibly fail. The assignment? Write a 10-word thesis on something he learned in boating school. Simple, right? Wrong. SpongeBob overthinks it to the point of a nervous breakdown, but before his brain completely short-circuits, Mrs. Puff gives in and passes him anyway. SpongeBob gets his shiny new driver's license, and Mrs. Puff breathes a sigh of relief, until guilt kicks in like an out-of-control engine. And so the hallucinations begin. Mrs. Puff has a vivid daydream of SpongeBob driving his new license straight into Bikini Bottom's destruction. Think craters, overturned buildings, and residents running for cover. But she reassures herself that SpongeBob doesn't own a boatmobile, so what's the harm? Turns out, a crap load. She comes home to find SpongeBob, his parents, and a massive cake waiting to celebrate her success as a teacher. Oh, and surprise! SpongeBob's parents just bought him a brand new boatmobile. The horror. SpongeBob promptly passes out into the cake, leaving Mrs. Puff spiraling. She knows she's unleashed a ticking time bomb onto the roads of Bikini Bottom. But does she come clean? Nope. Instead, she goes full heist mode, planning to steal SpongeBob's boatmobile. Fast forward to that night, SpongeBob's parents have tucked him in with strict instructions not to drive. And of bloody course, he sneaks out as soon as they're gone. He hops into his new ride, but dozes off before going anywhere. Enter Puff, disguised and ready for Grand Theft Boatmobile. She hotwires the thing and takes off, but SpongeBob wakes up mid-theft all like,
Hey! I'm driving!
What follows is a fast and furious chase sequence that includes Mrs. Puff trying to knock SpongeBob off the boat, him clinging to the bumper like an action hero, and the police watching it all like, yep, this feels normal for Bikini Bottom. The madness ends when SpongeBob unmasks the thief, revealing Mrs. Puff, and because it's Bikini Bottom, their high-speed chase concludes by crashing straight into a police car. Smooth, brah. Cut to Mrs. Puff in jail, where she admits she shouldn't have passed SpongeBob. He, in turn, agrees to relinquish his license. Crisis averted, right? Wrong again. Mrs. Puff drops the bombshell that SpongeBob will continue his lessons with a new teacher, Mrs. Flounder. But SpongeBob insists that Mrs. Puff is the only driving teacher for him. He even suggests bribing the warden with free driving lessons to get her out of jail early. Puff's bad decision-making turns the already hazardous streets of Bikini Bottom into a demolition derby. Between SpongeBob's driving skills, or lack thereof, and her questionable ethics, it's a wonder anyone in this town survives. No free rides, more like no safe roads. And we're going from the frying pan of bad driving straight into the fire of jellyfish-powered rebellion. Nature is about to make its stand in SpongeBob's Last Stand. Oh, SpongeBob's Last Stand, the episode where corporate greed meets jellyfish wrath, and the entire town of Bikini Bottom learns what happens when you mess with nature. It all starts with SpongeBob and Patrick having the time of their lives in jellyfish fields doing what they do best, frolicking with the jellyfish and singing the jellyfishing song. It's a peaceful, idyllic moment. Until Patrick spots a billboard that basically says, "Hey, we're bulldozing this paradise for a superhighway." SpongeBob is horrified and immediately springs into action, running into town to warn everyone of the environmental apocalypse about to unfold. But this is Bikini Bottom, where the residents treat logic and compassion like they're optional. Nobody listens. Dejected, SpongeBob heads to work at the Krusty Krab, hoping to find an ally in Krabs. And at first, it seems like he does, until Krabs reveals he's all for the highway. Why? Because he thinks it'll bring more customers to his restaurant. Classic bloody Krabs. But the greed fest takes a wild turn when SpongeBob inspects the blueprints and discovers that the Shelly Superhighway is Plankton's brainchild. The end of the highway, right at the chum bucket, conveniently cutting through the Krusty Krab to put Krabs out of business. Now, Krabs flip sides faster than a flipping Krabby Patty and joins SpongeBob in confronting Plankton. Unfortunately, Plankton has receipts. The entire town already approved the highway, including, awkwardly, Mr. Krabs. Determined to save Jellyfish Fields, SpongeBob and Patrick go full protest mode, handing out flyers and singing "Give Jellyfish Fields a Chance." Instead of rallying support, they get pelted with their own flyers and mocked by Nat, who crushes Patrick's tambourine for emphasis. Adding insult to injury, the cops show up and arrest them, tossing them into the middle of nowhere because SpongeBob didn't have a license for his sitar. Bikini Bottom logic strikes again. But Patrick has a plan, or rather a memory of his great-uncle Cletus and his Freedom March days. Inspired, they press on, only to get stomped by a literal parade celebrating the highway's construction. Things go from bad to plain shitty when Plankton shows up with his giant paver to start building, squishing SpongeBob flat in the process. And the superhighway takes shape. Jellyfish Fields withers into a barren wasteland, and all the jellyfish flee. With the highway complete, Bikini Bottom devolves into a polluted dump. The Krusty Krab is a ghost town, and Mr. Krabs is so desperate he unveils Plan Z-Niner-Niner, which involves giving up the Krabby Patty formula and shutting down the restaurant forever. Squidward is thrilled. No more customers, no more work. But before Krabs can follow through, the jellyfish strike back. And I mean strike. For 3 days straight, they unleash a stinging rebellion, turning Bikini Bottom into an apocalyptic jellyfish war zone. Even Plankton isn't safe as the vengeful jellyfish storm the chum bucket and sting him into oblivion. With the town in chaos, SpongeBob sees his chance to rally the residents one last time. Using a new broadcast, he pleads for them to destroy the highway and restore Jellyfish Fields. At first, the townsfolk are resistant, but when SpongeBob says,
You're kidding, right?
Yes!
they change their tune and join him. Mood swing much, Bikini Bottom? Armed with Plankton's own paver, SpongeBob leads the charge to unpave the highway. Even Plankton tries to stop them, but he ends up squashed like roadkill. The townsfolk push together, and the highway crumbles, restoring Jellyfish Fields to its former glory in record time. The episode ends with everyone singing the jellyfishing song in the now flourishing fields. Peace is restored, but the lesson is clear. Bikini Bottom is only safe when the residents pull their heads out of their asses and take action. Until then, it's one bad decision away from total disaster. But don't get too comfortable. When greed sets sail, safety is just a myth, and Mr. Krabs is about to prove it in Clams. Welcome to Clams, where greed meets madness and the ocean fights back. The story begins at the Krusty Krab, where a customer struggles to decide what to order. Squidward declares that he hates everything on the menu. But SpongeBob, being SpongeBob, convinces the customer to order coral bits for $1. Little do they know, this isn't just any dollar, it's Mr. Krabs' $1 millionth earned. Cue the confetti, the jubilation, and Mr. Krabs announcing that he's taking SpongeBob and Squidward on a surprise celebratory trip. Squidward, dreaming of a luxurious getaway, guesses they're heading to places like Fancy Springs or Pamper Island. But this is Mr. Krabs we're talking about, so they end up clam fishing on the SS Cheapskate in a smelly brine lagoon. It's like taking your coworkers to a sewer for a work retreat. While fishing, SpongeBob accidentally hooks Krabs' pants, where he taped his precious millionth dollar, sending the bill flying into the lagoon. Enter the giant clam. Dramatic, live-action orchestra music warns of impending doom as the clam leaps out of the water, snatches the dollar, and swims away, leaving Mr. Krabs in shambles. His tears could probably fill another bloody lagoon, but Squidward, in a rare act of not being a complete ass, promises to help retrieve the dollar. Day 1, Mr. Krabs arms everyone with supplies and they set up camp on the boat. Day 3, still no clam. SpongeBob and Squidward, now sleep-deprived and starving, devise a plan. SpongeBob uses Coral Blue No. 3 semi-gloss lipstick, why the hell he has it, I don't know, to forge the dollar, but Krabs sees through the ruse instantly. At this point, Krabs has lost his shit. He tosses all the food and the fridge into the lagoon, leaving a single sandwich as bait, saying,
I see. Then I guess I have no choice but to offer a reward.
SpongeBob and Squidward realize that their boss is nuttier than Sandy's acorn stash at this point and attempt to escape. but Mr. Krabs catches them and ties them up as live bait. Cue the dramatic orchestra again, this time conducted by Mr. Krabs himself. The clam reappears with Krabs' dollar perched mockingly on its tongue. What follows is pure chaos. Krabs drives them into the clam's mouth to reclaim his beloved dollar, leaving SpongeBob and Squidward to assume he's a goner. Just when all hope seems lost, Krabs pops out of the lagoon holding his dollar in triumph. The price? Oh, nothing much, just his entire body save for his head and one arm, which he somehow negotiated to keep. Apparently the clam accepted the trade. How is this crustacean still alive? The episode ends with SpongeBob and Squidward staring in horror as their boss, reduced to a head and claws, celebrates his victory. Sometimes you can love money a little too much. But just wait until you see what happens when SpongeBob and Patrick try to brave the wilderness. Spoiler alert, nature wins in To Save a Squirrel. In To Save a Squirrel, Bikini Bottom's two most clueless residents, SpongeBob and Patrick, decide to crash Sandy's wilderness trip. The episode kicks off with SpongeBob and Patrick running for their lives, screaming about being chased by a beast. Turns out their terrifying predator is a cricket. Yes, a cricket, and not even a feckin' big one. They stumble upon Sandy, who's busy packing her Jeep with camping supplies, including the essentials: food, water, tents, and, because it's Sandy, dynamite. When SpongeBob and Patrick beg to join her on her wilderness adventure, Sandy gives them a firm nope, warning that her survivalist camp is way too dangerous for their soft pineapple-dwelling selves. But do SpongeBob and Patrick listen? Nope. They sneak into her trunk like two kids hiding in the back seat for a forbidden road trip. Things go downhill fast when they tumble out of the Jeep mid-ride along with the supplies. Now stranded in the middle of nowhere with no clue what to do, SpongeBob and Patrick decide to embrace their inner wilderness warriors. Or at least try to. SpongeBob sets up the tent while Patrick takes charge of the campfire. Only Patrick's idea of a campfire is burning all their food. SpongeBob tries to extinguish the flames with the tent, which catches fire too. Then, in an act of peak survival instinct, SpongeBob drinks the last bit of water. Congratulations, boys! You've burned the food, destroyed the tent, and lost all your water supply in record time. Stumbling across a creepy cave, they decide it's their best bet. But wait, they're not alone. An old man who looks like he walked out of a survival horror movie appears and declares the cave their new home. This hermit claims he's been stuck in the valley for 40 years with no escape. Things only get weirder when SpongeBob, losing his grip on reality, becomes convinced that Patrick is plotting to eat him. The old man, clearly enjoying the drama, eggs SpongeBob on, suggesting he eat Patrick first. Horror movie. Anyway, what follows is SpongeBob and Patrick going full-on survival of the hungriest, trying to eat each other like two toddlers reenacting Lord of the Flies. The tension builds until the old man finally reveals the twist. He's not a hermit at all, it's Sandy in disguise. Sandy confesses that this whole ordeal was a setup to test their survival skills. Somehow the fact that they failed spectacularly doesn't stop her from awarding them survival badges. But just when you think it's over, SpongeBob and Patrick, still in cannibal mode, turn their hunger on Sandy. Whipping out the ketchup, they start chasing her, forcing her to flee while muttering,
Uh-oh! Next time I'll bring more granola!
If SpongeBob and Patrick were humanity's last hope for survival, we'd be in Shit Street heading for Doom Valley. Who knew camping could be such a terrifying mix of slapstick comedy and psychological warfare? Only in Bikini Bottom. If you survived the last episode, congratulations! Now get ready for the Tattletale Strangler, a villain who takes danger in Bikini Bottom to a whole new level in The SpongeBob Meets the Strangler. In this wild ride of an episode, Bikini Bottom's crime rate spikes as we meet one of the most dangerous and unlucky criminals in town, the Tattletale Strangler. It all starts with our spongy boy doing his usual overachieving at the Krusty Krab, this time obsessively cleaning up every scrap of litter. When some dude blatantly chucks trash on the ground, SpongeBob doesn't just lecture him, he calls the cops. I mean, hey, I admire the commitment to keeping the streets clean, bud. But here enters the twist. Squidward informs SpongeBob that the litterbug is none other than the Tattletale Strangler, a notorious criminal who strangles anyone who rats him out. Squidward dips out immediately after dumping this info, leaving SpongeBob alone to process this terrifying crap nugget. Before SpongeBob can fully panic, news breaks that the Strangler has escaped custody. SpongeBob, still optimistic and oblivious, begs the police for help, but they straight up call him a tattletale and leave him to fend for himself. Job, law enforcement. Now on his own, SpongeBob attempts to hire a bodyguard, but nobody's brave or foolish enough to take on the Strangler. Just when SpongeBob seems doomed, a suspicious familiar man with a mustache volunteers to protect him. Yeah, it's the Bloody Strangler in disguise. His genius plan: lead SpongeBob to an isolated spot and finish the job. But SpongeBob, the king of inconvenient errands, insists on running a list of chores first. These errands turn into a gauntlet of frustration for the Strangler. At every turn, SpongeBob's clueless antics make it impossible for him to enact his plan. They eventually end up at SpongeBob's house, where the Strangler makes yet another attempt, only to be thwarted by a surprise party SpongeBob's friends throw for his 100% on-time average. Yes, this is a thing. The party drags on, then transitions into another party, leaving the Strangler increasingly unhinged. After what feels like hours of interruptions, the Strangler finally reveals his true identity, ripping off his fake mustache in a rage. As the chaos escalates, Patrick shows up for reasons that only Patrick understands. The Strangler tries to convince him that Patrick himself might be the Strangler, prompting Patrick to freak out and turn himself in. Typical. But does SpongeBob understand the danger he's in? Of course not. He's too busy being impressed that the Strangler removed his mustache without shaving cream. The stranger screams that it's fake.
Oh, it's a fake, you! I bought it at the party store!
Then Squidward goes,
Did someone say party?
and you can guess what happens next. The whole ordeal leaves SpongeBob confused and the Strangler seething with rage. Realizing that strangling SpongeBob is impossible with this level of chaos, the Strangler bails, literally running through walls, crashing vehicles, and eventually stumbling straight into the police station. SpongeBob, still under the impression that the Strangler is his bodyguard, chases him down, insisting he still needs protection. The Strangler ends up in a jail cell, and SpongeBob finally notices the wanted poster, clocking the truth way too late. For a moment, the Strangler seems relieved to be away from SpongeBob, until he discovers Patrick is his new cellmate. Patrick casually asks,
Hey, Mac. What are you in for?
The Strangler's dangerous reputation crumbles under SpongeBob's relentless naivete, Patrick's random appearances, and a town that seems to function on pure chaos. The result? A hilarious reminder that in Bikini Bottom, crime never pays. But it might drive you insane. But enough about crime, let's talk about chaos. Because in Bikini Bottom, even the smallest mishap can escalate into a catastrophe of epic proportions in fungus. The episode starts with SpongeBob waking up to a very hangry Gary. Turns out Gary isn't vibing with his organic snail food. He's clearly not a health nut. Instead, he's got his eye on this gross patch of sea fungus chilling on the floor. Naturally, SpongeBob nearly shits himself and tries to clean it up, but Patrick pops by and does what Patrick does best: give the worst advice imaginable. He tells SpongeBob to scratch his head like he's auditioning for a dandruff shampoo commercial, which only spreads the ick all over him. Great job, buddy. SpongeBob heads to work, where the fungus keeps multiplying like it's auditioning for its own spin-off. He tries everything to get rid of it, but only ends up spreading it around. Squidward, in peak not my problem mode, calls the Bikini Bottom SWAT team. These guys show up like it's a zombie outbreak, throw SpongeBob into a bubble quarantine, and wheel him home. But not before a little bit of the fungus lands on Squidward's head, triggering Bikini Bottom's next big problem. Squidward's itch fest spreads the ick all over the Krusty Krab, turning the restaurant into ground zero for the world's least appetizing outbreak. Meanwhile, at the Pineapple, Patrick comes over to cheer SpongeBob up, which doesn't help at all. Patrick, being bloody Patrick, manages to pop SpongeBob's bubble by suggesting,
Hey, wanna play a game of pirate wrestling?
Sure.
but hey, at least he blows a new one. By this point, though, SpongeBob looks like he's hosting a fungus rave in his quarantine zone. Back at the Krusty Krab, chaos reigns supreme. The customers, the food, even crabs are covered in this icky green nightmare. The health inspector shows up, takes one look, and immediately declares war on SpongeBob. Krabs tries to shift the blame onto Squidward, who in turn points the finger back at SpongeBob. The mob decides SpongeBob's the problem, and things escalate to the point where it looks like the poor guy's about to get pitchforked. And then, plot twist, Gary saves the day. Turns out snails are bottom feeders, and eating fungus is basically their whole ass thing. Gary rolls up, starts chomping down on the ick like it's a buffet, and cures everyone in sight. Seeing dollar signs, Mr. Krabs sets up a full-on de-icking business where Bikini Bottomites pay $5 a pop for Gary to clean them up. The episode ends with Gary as the unsung hero and Krabs proving that yes, he will absolutely profit off of your misery if given the chance. And just when you thought the ick-covered chaos was enough, it's time for a lesson in fast food disaster management in Krusty Krab training video. What starts as a quirky orientation for Bikini Bottom's most iconic burger joint quickly devolves into a showcase of just how unsafe this restaurant really is. First, we dive into Mr. Krabs' origin story. It's your typical tale, a childhood love for money, a post-war existential crisis, and converting a rundown retirement home into a greasy spoon. Totally normal, right? But don't let the cheerful narration fool you. This backstory reveals Krabs' obsession with cutting costs, setting the tone for the safety standards ahead. The training officially kicks off with SpongeBob, the poster child for overachieving fry cooks, enthusiastically demonstrating the Krusty Krab way. On the other hand, Squidward, our designated slacker, serves as a walking cautionary tale. Through SpongeBob's relentless optimism and Squidward's trademark disdain, we get lessons in hygiene. Spoiler, the soap budget is slim. Workstation organization, don't slip on those spilled pickles. And customers, where yelling, "Next!" is apparently part of the protocol. Then there's the infamous acronym POOP.
People order our patties.
Ah, poop!
It's catchy, sure, but it doubles as a stark reminder of how robotic the Krusty Krab expects its workers to be. Who needs individuality when you can flip burgers at lightning speed for minimum wage? The video also doesn't skimp on workplace dangers. From Plankton's relentless theft attempts to the high-pressure environment of handling rush-hour mobs, it's clear that the Krusty Krab values profits over employee well-being. And in true Bikini Bottom fashion, the training's safety tips feel more like comedic guidelines than actual precautions. Finally, just as you're about to learn the sacred Krabby Patty recipe, the ultimate payoff, the video abruptly ends, leaving viewers with one last reminder. The Krusty Krab is as much a battleground for shitty shenanigans as it is for sandwiches. When you peel back the goofy training montages and corporate catchphrases, this episode is a biting satire of workplace culture. It's hilarious, sure, but it also reinforces one troubling truth. In Bikini Bottom, safety isn't just overlooked, it's straight up optional. But hey, I'm just a guy who likes cartoons. Catch you in the next video.